Welcome to a Community Partners interview where we explore the organizations, opportunities, and resources that look to make change in our daily lives. I'm your host, Sean Pickard, and you're listening to Voices for Ability Radio, all abilities, all the time. Today, I'm joined by Shauna Beaudoin, the Director of Programs and Information for Hydrocephalus Canada. Hydrocephalus Canada is more than an organization. They're a community built on hope, strength, and unwavering support for those impacted with hydrocephalus and spina bifida across Canada. Hydrocephalus Canada's mission is to connect the spina bifida and hydrocephalus communities across Canada through services, support, education, awareness, and research. Their vision is a future without spina bifida and hydrocephalus. Thank you for joining us today, Shauna. How are you doing?
I'm great. Thank you for having me, Sean.
Well, it's wonderful to hear a little bit more about hydrocephalus and spina bifida, but before we get going there, tell us a little bit more about the Shauna Beaudoin experience. What inspired you to work at Hydrocephalus Canada, and why work with individuals with disability?
So, 54 years ago, I was born with spina bifida, and I lived in a small community. And when I moved to Toronto, it was quite by coincidence that I found the organization. And at the time, I had just had surgery, so I was between jobs, and I started to volunteer with the organization. And from there, it's been a mutual partnership. I started as a volunteer, and then I became a casual laborer, and then I became the information and services coordinator, and now I'm the director of programs and information.
So you just worked your way through the system then, Shauna.
I did.
Excellent. Now, can you tell us a little bit about hydrocephalus and spina bifida? What are they? What are the symptoms? How can someone be diagnosed?
Absolutely. So hydrocephalus is a condition that can affect anyone at any age. Most people know hydrocephalus because it's often closely related with spina bifida. Hydrocephalus is an accumulation of fluid, which we all have in our brain, that cushions our brain and our spinal column. Hydrocephalus develops when that fluid is blocked from draining, and it puts lots of pressure on the brain. So in order to relieve the pressure from the brain, surgery has to be performed, and it's neurosurgery, so brain surgery. And what they do in most cases is they implant a mechanical device called a shunt that has tubing and a valve that manages that excess flow and reroutes it to another part of the body, usually into the stomach area. Now, spina bifida is a condition that you are born with. It doesn't develop at any other part of your life. You are born with this condition. It is a neural tube defect, and it occurs within the first 4 weeks of pregnancy, when many women aren't even aware that they are pregnant. So one way we support the community is by advocating that all women of childbearing age should take a multivitamin with at least 0.04 milligrams of folic acid. Through research, folic acid has been determined to help with the growth of the neurotube, brain, and spine. So spina bifida is a neurological condition as well, and it often results in varying degrees of disability, including mobility. Many people will have bowel and bladder dysfunction. Some may have learning disabilities. It all depends on where the spina bifida occurs on the spine. The higher up on the spine, the less likely that you will have mobility in your legs. You may have to use a wheelchair to get around, or crutches, a cane, a walker for support. With hydrocephalus, it's not as, so the mobility issues aren't as great, but again, also depends on the damage caused by the hydrocephalus to the brain. Now, hydrocephalus, as I mentioned, can occur at any point in life. Some people develop hydrocephalus because of an infection like meningitis. Others develop hydrocephalus due to a traumatic brain injury, or actually a brain tumor. And then there's another population of people that have been developing hydrocephalus, and that is our elderly population. It's a condition called normal pressure hydrocephalus. It's very difficult to diagnose because the symptoms are similar to Parkinson's and Alzheimer's. So the majority of people who actually have normal pressure hydrocephalus are being misdiagnosed. And in fact, if they do have NPH, which we call, normal pressure hydrocephalus or NPH, there is a possibility that if they are assessed and treated in a good time frame, that the symptoms can be reversed and that their quality of life will be improved. And some things that are key indicators of normal pressure hydrocephalus are a shuffling walk, where the individual feels like their feet are stuck to the floor. They attempt to walk up a curb and they miss the curb completely. Their balance is off. They may have some form of early dementia and in some cases bladder incontinence as well. Now, hydrocephalus on the whole, in other types of hydrocephalus, the symptoms can be, in babies, it can be projectile vomiting, head enlargement, the soft spot, the fontanel spot on the head could be very like bloated to the touch. That is showing the buildup of fluid. They could be very lethargic, very cranky. Some babies develop a condition called stridor, where when they cry, their neck goes back. Some babies will show a deviation in their eyes. They don't look perfectly forward, but kind of downturn. All of these are very immediate symptoms and they need to be dealt with ASAP. Think of having hydrocephalus as, if you have any of the hydrocephalus symptoms, it's very similar to having heart attack symptoms, and they need to be monitored and treated as soon as possible to avoid further damage.
So it's quite serious finding that first symptom, right?
Yes.
It's kind of scary some days when these things can creep up on you, right?
Absolutely. And, people born with spina bifida, now through the technology that is in the medical field, it can be detected within the first trimester. And there is also surgery now called fetal surgery, where a specialized team of maternal health and pediatric neurosurgeons will go into the womb and repair the lesion, which is an opening on the spine in utero. They have found that by doing this, when the baby is born the second time at term, that there's usually a reduction in hydrocephalus. Some babies don't even develop it. And some of their symptoms, such as bowel and bladder function and mobility issues, may not be as severe as if they had not had the fetal surgery. An interesting fact, 80% of people that have spina bifida also have hydrocephalus.
So the two really go hand in hand quite often.
They do, but what we're seeing more now is hydrocephalus on its own, due to the various situations that I mentioned, such as in our elderly population, the normal pressure hydrocephalus, brain injury, and brain tumor.
Yes, the ones that can creep up on you.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I also saw on your website, Shauna, that you have webinars and guest speakers. Can you tell me a little bit more about the webinars? Who have some of your guest speakers been?
Absolutely. So we have a large medical population that we have had an amazing partnership with for over 50 years. So we've had a partnership, I guess you could say, or a relationship with the Hospital for Sick Children since basically the day this organization was formed in 1973. So a lot of our webinars are based in medical knowledge, and they're educational webinars that our community has requested. So for instance, last year we had a panel of experts from the Hospital for Sick Children and Sunnybrook talking specifically about bowel and bladder function and management for pediatrics and for adults. Because when you're a kid, this is usually when you develop the conditions or the secondary conditions that can occur with either spina bifida and hydrocephalus. And as you get older, they don't go away. They become managed. But as you transition out of pediatric care, you still have to be followed in the adult world. And that's where some people may fall through the cracks in the transition, because they might not need that immediate attention when they transition out of pediatrics. But down the line they might, and it's often very difficult to find the appropriate healthcare provider in the adult world.
That is very, very true. Very true. And speaking of the difficulties with finding healthcare providers and such, Let's talk a little bit about caregivers. There's a recreational respite and Rexall care support program that you have. Tell me a little bit about that.
Yes, this is very new for us. We were fortunate to receive some funding from the Rexall Care Network last year to develop a workshop for caregivers because we recognize that caregivers have a lot on their plate. Managing a family member or a loved one with these conditions, and they need support. So we did a 5-week workshop series, and each series had a focus. And from the workshop and what we learned from the people that joined the workshop, who were all caregivers of various ages, and like some were parents, some were spouses, some were siblings. And from that, we have developed a caregiver toolkit, which has just been launched on our website. So feel free to go to our website. It's hydrocephalus.ca and download that toolkit if you're a caregiver. And hopefully it helps you navigate some self-care that many caregivers forget to do for themselves.
And that's very important, making sure the caregiver is actually there to care for the person they're looking after. So personal care, very important.
Yes.
And the next thing that I came across, Shauna, I have to say, I am a fan of the creative aspect of what individuals with disabilities can do. And I know that sometimes education needs to be a little creative.
Yes, absolutely.
So let's talk about TAP, or the Teaching Awareness Through Puppetry. What is it? How does it work?
So Teaching Awareness Through Puppetry is a community group that teaches disability awareness through puppetry. So they go into schools, they go into community centers. There's different puppets that have different scripts depending on what the teacher has requested. So for instance, we sponsor 3 puppets through TAP, and we have a puppet, Andrew, who lives with hydrocephalus. We have a puppet, Mara, who lives with spina bifida. And we have a puppet, Bonnie, who lives with spina bifida as well. And those puppets regularly go to schools and they talk about their conditions and what they can do living with these conditions. And the students get to ask questions of the puppets. It's a workshop. It's usually an hour and a half long. They also do it virtually now. Through the pandemic, we pivoted like everybody else, that favorite word, pivot, and opened it up to online performances. And now they have the capability of doing the workshops all across Canada. So they're very informative and very age related to helping kids understand that differences are okay, because we're all different.
That is very true. We are all different, but at the same point in time, I believe you're also saying that, who was it? It was Mara, Andrew, and Bonnie. They couldn't do the interview today because they're too busy at the schools, right?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Now, speaking of schools, there are some scholarships and bursaries that get handed out by Hydrocephalus Canada.
Yes.
How can someone apply? What are the restrictions? Let's talk about the scholarships and bursaries.
So there's only a couple of days left to apply for the national scholarship. The deadline is April 30th. The only requirement that an individual needs is to be an individual with spina bifida and or hydrocephalus or both conditions, and that you are going to attend a post-secondary institute in September. So you can be a doctoral student, you can be someone just coming out of high school, going into college or university, or even a trade institution. And we have a committee that reviews all of the scholarship applications, and then they have a scoring system and they determine who they award the scholarships to each year. The amount of scholarships varies each year depending on how many applications we receive and the amount of funding that we have each year. So the National Dr. E. Bruce Hendrick Scholarship was actually named after one of the prominent neurosurgeons at Sick Kids who basically brought pediatric neurosurgery to sick kids. He was one of the 3 H's. He was known as one of the 3 H's back in the early days of pediatric neurosurgery at Sick Kids. It was Dr. Hendrick, Dr. Hoffman, and Dr. Humphreys who took care of many children with spina bifida and hydrocephalus. So you have a couple of days left to apply for the scholarship. The deadline is the end of business, which would be 5 p.m. on April 30th. The Luciana Spring Mascarum Bursary is a smaller bursary, and it's only available to individuals that reside in Chatham, Kent, and Windsor, Essex community. It is a family-driven bursary for our organization, and the family is from that community, and that's where they wish to share their bursary funds, is to a resident of that community. And that deadline has already passed.
So there are a couple out there for people to access.
Yes, actually, there's many scholarships out there for individuals with disabilities. A really good website to check out is Student Awards. I think it's .com. Studentawards.com.
Studentawards.com. Okay. For scholarships?
Yes, but we have a specific scholarship for people with spina bifida or hydrocephalus.
Now, is there any restrictions on where they wish to go to school? Does it have to be a Canadian institution, international? They can do that?
No, they can do that. We once had an older student who was doing her fellowship in England. So
that's a nice little trip. Yeah.
Yes. And we had an art student who was I believe she went to Italy for a year, and that's the year that she won the scholarship.
Very nice. So we've had students go to England or the UK. We've had them go to Italy. That's really neat, right? There's a little bit of success there.
Yes.
So let's move into a success story then, Shauna. Tell me about a time when somebody reached out and asked for help. What supports were put in place? Tell me what happened. Just please don't identify them. Give me a success story.
Right. That's kind of a loaded question. We get various calls every day. It could be a parent who's pregnant and just found out that their child has spina bifida and hydrocephalus. So that's the type of support we provide there, is counseling and giving them an understanding of what it means to live with the condition. And then we have parents who maybe call us when their child is starting school and they need resources for their teachers. So that's something that we provide to parents. It might be an adult who is experiencing some kind of health issue and they don't know which doctor to reach out to, or they just don't know where to start. So they'll call us first, and we have, over the years, we have accumulated a list of healthcare professionals that are knowledgeable in both conditions, and we can suggest where they need to seek referrals for. Does that answer your question without being too direct?
Oh, it does, because you're right. Those little supports, those little success stories, they happen every day.
Every day.
Yes. And it's awesome.
Thank you.
So let's take a slightly different look at things then, Shauna.
Okay.
What is the one thing you see happening over and over again to individuals with disabilities today that shouldn't be, and how do we stop it?
There's still many barriers that those of us with disabilities face every day. It could be a barrier to get into a building. It could be a barrier to accessing employment. One of the biggest ones we get a lot of calls for is accessing healthcare. If we could, we would try and push people through the door as fast as we can, but there's a long waiting list for the specialists. Especially for those who are waiting for an assessment for normal pressure hydrocephalus. Because first you have to go to a neurologist who does many different medical tests. And then if they determine that treatment such as a shunt would be applicable for you, then you have to be referred to a neurosurgeon, and that could take another 3 to 6 months before you see your neurosurgeon. Those are some of the barriers that we can face.
Yeah, it can be a very, very time-consuming process to get through everything.
Absolutely. And that's why we're here to help, because we know some of the ins and outs and can help you at least find referrals for people we know have knowledge of these conditions, specialists.
Can you tell me about a time when someone reached out just completely lost?
I had a call yesterday.
What happened?
It's a typical situation. Family member trying to advocate for another family member, but coming up against a bit of a brick wall as to how to support them. Caregiver burnout for sure. And just having her voice everything that was going on and me talking to her helped her considerably. We decided on a route to take, and hopefully they're going to look into some of the avenues that we suggested, and they're going to come out to our support group.
That is awesome to hear. That is awesome. Now, along the same lines of that, though, Shauna, if someone wanted to become a member of Hydrocephalus Canada and help out or receive some of those supports that you have spoken about today, or if someone wanted to join as a volunteer, what's the process for that? Can we go down those two different paths there, volunteering versus membership?
Sure. So to begin with, anyone at any point in time can reach out for support from our organization. You do not need to be a member to receive support, information, or resources. Being a member of our organization is being part of our community. We don't ask for a lot from our members, and the membership fee is very little. When we can, we provide member perks, I guess you could say. For instance, we have a kids and youth book club where we distribute age-appropriate books to kids on their disability or on disabilities in general. So we have a couple of books called The Abilities in Me with Spina Bifida, The Abilities in Me with Hydrocephalus. We just reprinted a book called Just Like Any Other Beagle. It's a wonderful little coloring book, and Barney the Beagle has hydrocephalus, and he tells you all about his life with hydrocephalus, and you get to, read along with his story and color in however you'd like to represent Barney. And then for volunteering, we're always looking for volunteers. So you can go to our website under Get Involved and click on the menu and fill out the volunteer form, and someone will get back to you within a couple of days to talk with you about what you're interested in and if we have any opportunities. We actually are hosting a walk on June 8th, and we are looking for volunteers to help with the setup and the takedown for the day, helping along the course of the 5-kilometer walk, being on our cheer squad, helping at the refreshment table and the registration table. And by the way, Teaching Awareness Through Puppetry will probably be there as well. So you can come out and meet Bonnie, Andrew, and Mara, along with Moose and Beaver and Dog and some of the other wonderful characters that are TAP. We also need volunteers for our board of directors. We're an organization governed by a volunteer board. We always need volunteers in the community to be a community contact. We prefer people who are within the community to be those contacts because they understand the conditions, and because they're the first point of contact, they can help. And then if there's more information or support needed, then they direct them to us. We also have people who are parent links, adult links, youth links. And again, these are individuals who are impacted by the conditions and can provide one-on-one support to someone in a similar situation. You can also download our membership form from the website, same area, get involved, click on the menu, or you can do it right online.
That is excellent. So if listeners are looking for more information, Shauna, let's give it to them here. So things like the website. What's your website?
It's hydrocephalus.ca. So hydrocephalus.ca.
And social media? Facebook, things like that?
Yes, we're on Facebook, and we are on Instagram, LinkedIn, and we have a YouTube channel as well. All can be accessed through our website.
Excellent. And is there a phone number for folks such as myself that prefer the phone? Yes,
we have a 1-800 number that is toll-free across Canada and the U.S. It's 1-800-387-1575. And our general email is info@hydrocephalus.ca.
Excellent. And we are running out of time here, Shauna. Would you care to say bye to the folks at home?
Thank you again for this opportunity to talk about our organization and what we do and how we can support individuals with spina bifida and hydrocephalus. Just thank you so much for this opportunity. And have a great day, everyone.
And that's Shauna Beaudoin, the Director of Programs and Information for Hydrocephalus Canada. I'm your host, Sean Pickard, and that's all the time we have for today, folks. So until next time, bye for now.